This morning I'd like to share some thoughts on the idea of liberty, and specifically, for all these years working with men in prison and the past 6 or 7 years dedicating myself to the idea of working with men in prison when it comes to higher education and what we call the liberal arts, and that being those ways of learning to think that set the mind free so that the body can become free if it's not already. Liberty. Some people confuse the idea of liberty with with what's called licentiousness. Licentiousness is whatever it is that I want to do. That's what I want to do. It's my business. Stay out of it. That's licentiousness. Liberty is something else entirely. Liberty is, I've heard it said, and you've probably heard it said too, that your liberties end where someone else's begin, or something like that, or you're free to do whatever you want to do as long as it doesn't infringe on the liberty of somebody else. In a classical sense, liberty only exists within a certain moral framework. And so the higher the moral framework, the higher the quality of liberty. And when we look at the history of liberty to understand something about that moral framework and something about the potential of liberty, we can go all the way back to the Garden of Eden. In the Garden of Eden, there was perfect liberty. The idea of you are free to pursue your hopes and dreams. You are free to engage in every kind of activity that is within your nature as a being created in the image and likeness of God. But if you violate that nature, if you violate your God-given image, your God-given likeness, then you will lose liberty. And it goes something like this. I used to think that what happened in the garden with the fall, where Adam and Eve actually at first it's Adam, and Adam is there, and he is given the job to name all the animals and to tend the garden. He's given dignifying work to tend the garden, and he's told to subdue all of nature, all of creation, all of the world, every creature. I think that goes right down to every single microbe on the planet is to be under man's dominion, under man's rule. And the most important part of man to rule is self-rule and liberty. And so there's this sovereignty principle at play with liberty in the garden of you have complete liberty. You have complete freedom to do everything that it is that you want to do. But, and I always thought this was a justice issue, but don't you dare eat from this tree. This is my tree, and if you eat from this tree that's my tree, then I'm going to have to, you're going to die. And I that's what I used to think it was, and that what happened in the Garden of Eden was that Adam and Eve, when they were deceived, that somehow what they did was steal from God, like Prometheus stealing fire from the gods and getting in trouble with Zeus. And that's not it at all. What it is this knowledge of good and evil, this active participation in an evil act in order to understand it, is contrary to the nature of God. God has limited himself from partaking from this tree that he has created, because to participate in the evil in order to understand it, and not just being able to understand good as good because it's what there is, and evil is anything outside of that. But by participating in it, they have violated one of the fundamental principles of what it is to be made in the image of God, and have broken that image within themselves. See, the ability to make that choice, the ability to make the choice in the first place, that's liberty. The conditions to make a choice that would violate one's own image and likeness, that's liberty. And when we get to the end of chapter 1, there, verse 31 in the book of Genesis, right at the very beginning, within the first chapter, we have God saying, not only is the earth good, not only is light good, and the air is a good thing, plants and animals are good, the stars and the sun and the moon, all that's good. But when he creates man, at the end of that day, it's very good. And then chapter 2 tells us some things that happened in that day. Because after he creates them, male and female, he created them in the likeness of when God said, "Let us make man in our own image." After that's happened, he doesn't just say that it's good, but it's very good. In chapter 2 is where we see all the things that happened up until male and female, he created them. And before male and female, he created them, one of the things that Adam was instructed was, you can eat of the tree of life. You can eat of all the trees in the garden. It was every fruit you could. It was like being in the Caribbean on an island that is covered in fruits. And you can just run around naked and eat all the fruit that you want, play with the animals. After husband and wife, here's your wife, and y'all go and have fun and rule the world. And I'll check in on you every evening. We'll go for a walk and talk about all the good things you're discovering. And you can ask me any question that you want to, and I want to train you up. And that was the relationship. And God said it was very good. And one of the things that he commanded before creating female, one of the things that he commanded of mankind was, there's also a tree that is going to give you the knowledge of good and evil if you eat from it. And here it is. It's this tree specifically. Don't eat from it, because in the day that you eat from it, you're going to be corrupted, you're going to die. And I've heard preachers all my life talk about how that's a spiritual death, and then there's the progressive physical death that follows spiritual death. And that makes sense to me. That's good enough for me. But when that command was given, it's within the period of getting up to verse 31 in chapter 1, where God says, it's not just good, it's very good. So liberty is an ancient principle that goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden. It's part of what is very good. This opportunity to mess it all up is somehow essential to being made in the image and likeness of God. Liberty is essential to actualizing our full potential as humans made in the image of God. Now, some people won't like that, and they'll talk about some theological problems with that, or some evolutionary problems with that, or whatever. Well, if you just think about it conceptually, it is the only path forward is the ability to fail. If everything is protected, if you've got bumper pads put on all the furniture, and the kids are running around with a plastic with a helmet, to keep them from running into anything and hurting themselves, I mean that seems compassionate, and there are situations where that's going to be necessary. But as a general rule, the path forward is through some failure, through some pain, through some suffering. And that liberty to experience some failure, non-fatal failure, I heard one business guru talk about it one time. Non-fatal failure, where you can mess up, it's not going to kill you, it's going to hurt, it's going to be inconvenient for a while, but that kind of capacity to fail is essential to any kind of progress, any kind of success. And so the men that I've worked with have lost their physical mobility as far as being able to go wherever they want to, whenever they want to. They can't do the things that they want to whenever they want to. Their liberty has been stripped from them, and they're in a condition of slavery, or they're not necessarily slaves in what we would want to define it today, but they are in a confinement that I couldn't do it. I'll just say that. It'd be hard to go through that. And they're trying to discover how to handle liberty with very, 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 very few choices. And when we only have a couple choices, it's going to be revealed very quickly what our underlying character is. In the garden, they had two choices. You can do the one thing that is wrong, or you can experience, again, a garden paradise where you're just running around naked with the most perfect expression of the opposite of the species, able to do whatever you want to with absolutely no negative consequences, because everything is very good, even the opportunity to mess it all up with this choice. And to me, the fact that humans universally have the capacity to choose before the choice arrives, that we have the innate capacity to make a choice that would absolutely destroy us before the conditions for choice come along and we recognize them. That we have that capacity is some demonstration of a universal commonality between us. It's an expression of a deeper pre-existent nature that we are tapping into. I think it's being made in a divine image that we've messed up and that we've lost. And so part of a liberal arts education is discovering enough of the world and enough of the way that the world has worked in the past and the mistakes that people have made so that we can protect ourselves from reaching out and eating that fruit. We can recognize it for what it is on a daily basis, and day by day we can make the choice that would keep us free, that would keep us free of mind, free of conscience, that would keep us free of those decisions and actions that we see in history through all these literary characters, all these real people who suffered real things. We see their suffering and we're able to say, today I'm going to choose something different. And that's the beauty and the purpose of a liberal arts education, is to free us, or to give us the way of thinking and the examples in life to free us from the enslaving choices that we want to avoid. I've worked for the past 18, 19 years helping men in prison spiritually as an advisor come out of self-imposed slavery. And I've started helping people in the past 6 or 7 years come out of, through Christian higher education, come out of those choices that impose slavery on themselves. And I just think it's a vastly important thing, and we need to reclaim what higher education, and particularly what a liberal arts education, can do to improve the lives of people. I'd like to help you if there's any way that I can. Drop it in the comments below. Let me know if you like this. I will get back to Sallust soon. Thank you.